Oh, and we are live. There we go. Wednesday, March 11th, 2026, here in House Transportation. It is 2:00 or thereabouts. We are taking some testimony from the Pavers Association. We're looking for their feedback on the T-bill, on the amount of money we're spending on roads, road construction piece, and anywhere else that, I don't know if you would like to go first or will like to go first, or.
Yeah. Will Hattica. Can you hear me, Will Hattica? You're muted. I have to ask.
That's,
I apologize. We've switched over to Teams at Peckham. I'm not used to the Zoom.
Okay, so I
looking for
just
the audio button.
Okay, so I just have to ask you, I'm Patty McCoy from Pulteney, Vermont. Are your parents Dale and Bill Hattica?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so you were born exactly an hour after my daughter.
Wow. Okay. Well, there you go.
So welcome.
Guess
Small world.
we'll be bringing Will back to this committee.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. My name is Nick Sherman. I'm with Leonine Public Affairs. I'm here representing the Paving Association of Vermont, and I'm joined by Will Hattica from Peckham Industries. Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, we'll just maybe have Will introduce himself and give a quick little overview of Peckham and their operations here in the state of Vermont. And then I will jump into reaction to the proposed paving budget for FY27, and then we can answer any questions you might have.
Yep. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well,
All right. Yeah, my name's Will Hattica. I work with Peckham Industries. We're a family-owned business. We're basically all over the Northeast, but we do have a location in Shasbury, Vermont, and then over the past year, we purchased 2 quarries up in northern Vermont, the Calkins Rock Products up in Lyndonville, in Coventry as well. My role with the company, I'm in our materials business, which is hot mix asphalt paving, and our quarry business as well. So I oversee operations in all of New England and upstate New York.
appreciate Will being here. Vermont Paving Association incorporates the companies that you see paving the roads in the summertime here in Vermont. We come before this committee every year to speak to the budget, and appreciate the opportunity to do that this week on Crossover. Start by saying that we are supportive of the proposed FY 2027 paving budget. We really appreciate seeing an increase in that budget after a couple of years where there's been a downward trend, and think this is really critical for maintaining the infrastructure and supporting the industry that is critical to maintain that infrastructure in our state. So I want to just start there. We are supportive of the proposed paving budget. As we've said when we've come before this committee in past years, one of our top concerns and priorities when it comes to the budget and legislation in the paving sphere is sustainability of state transportation revenues, and specifically the ability of the state to be able to come up with the matching funds to be able to draw down federal funds. I know this committee spent a lot of time on this issue already this year, so I will go into that in detail as much as you want, but suffice it to say that that continues to be a concern. And I think from the trends that you're seeing from legislature's fiscal analysts and from the analysis that the agency has done, this is an issue that's coming to a head and needs to be addressed. And we appreciate the work that this committee's done, that the legislature's done, and that the administration has done in bringing forward a proposal this year that not only maintains but increases paving funding. That was not an easy proposal to develop, and the agency and the administration made some difficult decisions internally to ensure that will happen. because sustainability and consistency are so important to the industry, and I'll talk a little bit about why, we are also supportive of the proposal to gradually reduce the purchase and use transfer to return that funding to the state transportation fund. We think that's an appropriate use of those funds, and we think it is a good way to help create that consistency and sustainability over time. So we're supportive of that. I will say that part of, something that we're concerned with in terms of right now, we have a proposal that addresses this year. If we don't find a way to make the fund more stable going forward, we could very well be faced with a year after year situation where we're having to come up with a one-time solution. Last year got rid of the JTOC transfer, which we supported and was the right thing to do and has helped. But even with that action having been taken last year, this year we find ourselves in a place where, more money needs to be found to be able to sustain the transportation fund. And that trend is projected to get worse over time. Because consistency in the paving program allows companies to plan. And when they're able to plan, they're able to be more efficient. They save money. They have crews that work in multiple states. They have crews that work in multiple different parts of our state. If they know where those projects, when they're going to be bid, when they're expected to be implemented, they can maximize their efficiency, which translates into lower bids for the state. It helps the state save money. It helps them maintain workforce. This is seasonal work. And if they know that there's going to be consistency in the program from one year to another, they're better able to support their workforce, plan for their workforce to come back after the winter, and not lose those workers potentially to other states, or even if they stay within the company, being on a crew that's sent to New Hampshire or Maine to do work there. So those are just some examples of why predictability and consistency are so important, and why ultimately one of our biggest concerns, and we're really here asking you to support this year's proposal, but also take a real, hard look at the purchase and use proposal, which I know this committee has been supportive of, and do something that's really going to stabilize things in the long term. And while we appreciate very much that the proposed paving budget has gone up this year over the trends from the last couple of years, we are worried that we don't create a longer term solution, that next year we might be in a position where that drops back down. And it is, while we definitely appreciate an increase, it's hard year over year to have a paving budget that kind of goes up and down for all the reasons I just said, for planning, for consistency. Volatility is more costly than a process that's stable over time. And I think that the last thing that I'll say about the current proposed budget, and this ties into, I think, sustainability issue, is we also think it's very important that town highway is funded, and funded at workable levels. This is in part because that's work that our members do. It helps support the industry and keep them sort of stable here. But it's also, as you've heard, from the agency explaining the trends of how this process works, and maybe Will can speak more to the science of it. But if you don't maintain roads, they become more and more expensive to fix the longer you go without doing that maintenance. And that's true of the towns too. And if we get to a point where the towns are unable to, or it is increasingly challenging for them to maintain their program. Those pressures will translate into pressure on the state fund. And if you do something like bring the purchase and use revenue back, you'll have an increased stability in the fund that will help not only support, I think, the state work, but also the town work as well. So they kind of go hand in hand. And we appreciate that this committee has been seriously considering this, has been generally supportive, I think, and there's a long way to go, but we just wanted to come in and express what the proposed program and means to us and how that affects us both now and in the long term. Will, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would echo all your comments there. The consistency of the program is, super important to us just from a pure business perspective, right? I mean, it's, on any given year where you could potentially lose, 25 to 50% of your work, it makes it tough from a business to say, hey, how can we continue to invest in Vermont when we're really not sure what's going to come out the following year, or how can we maintain a workforce year after year and get people to come, want to come back and, work in our state. So that, consistency is important. And as Nick alluded to as well, as the roads continue to deteriorate, they become exponentially costly to fix. A full depth reclamation can cost, 4 to 5 times as much as just simply doing a quick mill and overlay, which is what we'd like to see. So, yeah, that was.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate your flexibility on a couple of the changes in the schedule. Nick, I'm curious, a big chunk of your business is in New York and South. And so how do you approach sort of Vermont as a whole from a strategic level of looking at where you're going to put your crews, where you're going to put your equipment, and sort of, how many years into the future do you look at? And there's a lot of questions in that, but I'm curious, as a market, or when you decide where your business development is going, or the time and energy you're going to put in, how do you look at Vermont in relation to it in its place in New England, its place in New York, its place within the seasonal kind of limitations? I mean, how does you move things throughout the year and down? I mean, how do you just sort of look at it when you're in the family owned for 100 years? How do you start to look at your approach to just Vermont as a small piece of a much bigger area?
Yeah, of course. One thing that makes it a little tricky for us in in Vermont in particular is the fact that we are located in Shasberry, Vermont, which is like in the southwest corner, Bennington. So, if you looked at a map at what roads come out on paving, I mean, we rarely see roads in our area, bigger state jobs. I think the Route 30 Rupert Paulett job will be one job we maybe get this year, but the plants themselves are fixed, right? So we understand where you make the actual asphalt, that is going to be at the same location every year, and there's going to be ebbs and flows to that based off what roads are paving in any given location. The construction crews themselves can travel. We really don't venture much outside of that southwest corner. I think maybe Rutland Castleton, we just won a job this past week, and I think Castleton, Vermont, where I'm actually from, and we'll bring that over from New York State just because we are right on the border there. But we are growing. We've made acquisitions of Calkins Rock Products up in the northwest corner, and while that may not be primarily paving, it is we do a fair amount of road construction in that area with the stone products. So again, it makes it tough to want to grow the business in Vermont, just knowing that, hey, there really isn't outside of the Burlington area, there really isn't a whole lot of predictability as to where we could be paving, I guess. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It certainly it helps. When it comes to the bid process of working with the agency, in comparison to working with other, well, I guess start with the state level agency, the bid process, how does it compare to where you work the majority of your other paving projects? The timeline, the communication, the process in general for bidding. You have any comment on how that works and doesn't work for your business, in relationship to how the agency performs?
I think it works fairly well. As far as what comes out, I think, if we were to get, say, this year, the increase in paving budget, I don't foresee any problems for us. The earlier, the better, I guess. The earlier we can know what's coming out the following year, the better we can allocate resources. We often do bounce crews back and forth between New York State and Vermont, and it is a bidding environment. So it's not only the work that comes out, we actually have to go out and win the work as well, which I'm sure you're aware of. So it can be tough year to year. At New York State, there's a little bit more of a balance just because we have more facilities. So where, hey, our Hudson Falls asphalt plant might be a little bit lower this year. Something downstate and say Catskill may have a better year just because those are the roads they're paving. In Vermont, for us, it really is a boom or bust based off of what's going on in Southwest Vermont.
Well, the reason I'd ask is because fiber, when I first got in the committee, there was a lot of talk about the timelines with the bidding process, and I haven't heard anything. That I had got the impression, on honest, that it was not the most user friendly to the vendor, to the contractors, but that I haven't heard anything about it as an issue in the last multiple years. So I'm sort of revisiting sort of the old. Somebody mentioned about seat changes. I think way back when I was sitting over there, there was a lot of talk about the state and not getting them out early enough and not being consistent enough or quick enough response. But I haven't heard that in the last couple of years. I'm curious if you have any comments.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I can speak to that. So I think it's been a long time now, but certainly a decade or more ago, it was tougher, I think. And this is where we really started coming to the legislature and talking about the importance of predictability and being able to plan. The bid schedule and the advertisement schedule at the agency was less predictable and less sort of set on a calendar timeline that made sense or that worked, at least for the industry. That was a long time ago. We did a lot of work talking and working with the administration and agency to try to address that, and it really has improved a lot. And years ago, it improved a lot. We generally mention that when we come in here as being important, but really it's been working quite well for a long time now. And a lot of that is getting those advertisements done, in the fall and in the winter. So once the weather changes and we're able to get out there, we can hit the ground running. I mean, I will let Will go into it if you want to talk about the sort of process from bid to actually putting a shovel in the ground, because he knows way more about it than I do, but it takes a while. So, you need those projects advertised in time where you can really be up and running once the weather cooperates. And that's absolutely gotten a lot better. But it does, I think, one of the concerns we have now about it's a similar theme. If we're doing the paving budget and the transportation budget on a kind of a 1-year basis, figuring out each year how we're going to make it work, I think that makes it harder to advertise projects in the fall. You don't know, if you're going to have the money or what the program's going to look like or what the proposal's going to look like. You got to wait for January for that and then go through the legislative process. So that's why we're really here advocating for a long-term solution. And we think the purchase and use proposal fits that bill. I think the process with the agency has been gone very well for a long time now, but now we have this funding challenge that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Representative Pouch, and then
Yeah.
Representative Case.
Thanks for doing this. I think, it's easy to understand long-term planning for this sort of thing. I'll say our town in Heinsberg years ago decided, hey, we're going to spend X amount per year on paving. And if we do that, it was like every 7 or 8 years, they could go back and they adjust it. They had a plan, but they adjusted depending on the roads. So I think that totally makes sense. I think you coming in here, talking about a long-term funding issue is, even trickles down to your industry and that, you're unsure and you can't plan year to year. I mean, I think this committee understands that. The purchase and use, I think I heard you say it's really a temporary fix. It's a fix, but it's not a permanent fix. So at some point, this committee is going to have to look at things like the gas tax, maybe put an inflationary factor on it, and, a mileage-based user fee, maybe something else. If this committee gets to that point, you can understand that's a pretty hard thing to sell. Would, your public affair, your group be willing to step up and say, you know what? It's painful, but these are the decisions that need to be made.
So devil's always in the details, but the answer is yes. And I would note that in 2015, when was the last time the legislature increased the gas tax? Whenever that was.
12, 13,
I don't know, 14, yeah, I don't know. For one of
We can't
them.
remember.
We can't remember. It was a long time ago. The proposal and the specifics of the proposal matter. So obviously I can't. But the answer is, do we advocate for making hard decisions to create a sustainable system? Absolutely. Absolutely we do. It's critical. It's just going to cost more money in the long run. Now we got to be smart about it. The purchase and use proposal, I think, is a good way to. And you're right. It's not going to be a solution forever, but right now we're looking at kind of 1 year at a time.
Kind of patches
Really
up
tough.
as we go.
If we can extend that some and get to a place where, I think it's not just the maybe politics that are hard, but implementation's hard. I mean, I know there's been talk about mileage-based user fee and local option tax and those types of proposals. And yes, absolutely, we're open to talking about that. And if it makes sense, we would certainly go and advocate for things that make sense. But that also takes time to implement, and how you do it depends on how much money you're gonna, draw down. And other states have implemented, there are case studies, I think, to some extent, but in other cases, not so much. So it's complicated. But yeah, I mean, we believe that it is in the state's best interest and the industry's best interest to have a program that's sustainable.
Thank you.
Representative Cases.
Has there been a time that you remember when we were predictable as far as paving goes? Was there a time when there was some consistency there, or?
Well, I mean, it's fluctuated over. I've been doing this 20 years, and I mean the program is, for the last 10 years at least, if not longer, has been significantly higher than it was 20 years ago. I mean, when I first started, it was a $60 million program, and I think this administration and this legislature have done a really good job of keeping it over 100 for 10 years, which is critical. And costs have gone up and your buying power goes down. So that over 100 10 years ago is different than it is now. But I think our concern right now is the projections. I mean, we're going off the same projections that this committee has seen, that I think both the administration and your fiscal analysts have brought forward, that show, we're not talking about a gradual decline. We're talking about an exponential situation because of a variety of factors, but the revenues just aren't there to support.
So how many miles do you think we should be doing?
Well, we come in here every year and say,
I
know
you're biased.
Yeah, we're a little biased, but so if 300 miles a year.
Okay, I've heard that before. Yeah.
Would you add, we think would be the right level to support the system based on lifetime spans of the treatments that you put down. You got to have a mix of the types of treatment. I know that the agency has done some explainers on that. If you want to go into it, I'm sure Will can speak to that better than I can, but there's different types of projects you can do. I think the agency does a good job of trying to, mix those into any 1 year's program. So you're trying to get the best bang for your buck. Obviously, there's certain roads that if they get so bad, there's only one kind of treatment you can do, and that's the most expensive. That's why there's a case to be made for maintaining at a lower level more often. I think, we think 300 miles is the right amount. It is a tough number to hit. And, one thing that has been concerning the past couple of years is that number has been dropping. I mean, I think 4 years ago, we were in the 250, somewhere in there, and it fell pretty significantly last year. The other thing we advocate for is that, as I said before, the type of project you do can determine how many miles you get out. So, we advocate that, the agency and the state be thoughtful about building that program to try to get as much as you can. And I think they do a good job of that. And it's critical as dollars get tight, look at where you can get more bang for your buck.
Thanks.
Representative Keiser's got it.
Yeah, this is a question about capacity and the fact that we had shrunk our ability to, or not our ability, our ability to finance paving and or construction. So the suppliers have shrunk, I would assume, some of that. They may have gone to other states and that type of thing. If we take the same example that happened this year and with the transfer of $10 million, and the idea is that we're going to transfer 10 million this year, 20 million and up to 50 million. And I like the fact that it steps because it allows capacity to build. But do you think in 5 years now that would just be an additional $300 million in federal and state dollars, there's capacity within the system to absorb the type of work we're talking about?
So I'm gonna let Will answer that because he's the one on the ground doing the work. But what I'll just preface it, Will, if I may, by saying the capacity question gets a lot easier when there's consistency. So if we're doing 148 million this year and then it drops 20% next year, and then you want to go back up the year after, that's where it gets concerning.
So the committee has to be sensitive to the fact that
that's part of
we
the,
don't want to be a whipsaw. What
yeah,
we want to do is
yeah,
build slowly or we build
yeah,
capacity. And that's where, $10 million this year produced $60 million worth of
Yeah.
work.
yeah.
And if you get out to 5 years, you've got $50 million and that same multiplier would convert into $300 million worth of work. So
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we can handle that if it's predictable. If we know if we know that that's the trend, that's the direction that it's going in, we can ramp up and you can hire. Sorry, go ahead. Will.
Well, yeah.
I was gonna say the other element to consider with that too is just the location. I mean, we're in a business where it is commodity driven and you can only ship the product so far before it just doesn't financially make sense. So I mean, if you were to spread it out, obviously there's roads that need to be paved and you can't necessarily just, decide which ones need to be paved, but all 60 million go to the southwest corner of Vermont, and then the next year that location doesn't get anything, and it all goes up to the northwest corner. That's what can make the inconsistency pretty tough there, and try to maintain a business, right? And ultimately, when we're looking at putting assets places, we're looking much further than just 5 years, right? So if you said you would need to balance it, I guess, across the state would be the best way of doing it, and yes, there would be the capacity for that.
What I hear is besides good planning, the increase to $300 million in 3 years their 5 years rather is not out of the ability of the industry to perform.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do not think that would be a problem.
So I had a question around the oil. What point do you get concerned about the price of oil? It's approaching $5 a gallon. You know, we're anticipated to do 145 miles this year. So at what point does that 145 get down to 120 based on oil? Or you really don't care about it? Price of
Well,
oil.
no, I mean, we
Well,
care. We
It's
want to.
integral part of.
Yeah, it's a big part of paving, and we obviously want to be, competitive and bring, we want to do the miles. So if the cost goes up and it's eating up those miles, we don't see that certainly is a good thing. I mean, as you know, the contracts have asphalt price adjustment in them for paving. So there's protection, I think, for both the state and the industry there when things are volatile, but I don't know. Will, your thoughts on that?
Just the impact it would have. I mean, certainly that's what we saw coming out of COVID, right? I think a lot of states, even federal funding, we saw a lot of extra funding, but when you looked at the miles paved, it really didn't make much of a difference. But those are all things we don't necessarily have control over, as the price of oil, the price of liquid asphalt. And we certainly look to be on the conservative side of pricing that into the work that we bid. But again, that's what the escalators are for, to protect us against that.
Somebody has to eat that up at one end or the other, Yeah, somebody's got to make it. You're gonna get.
Oil actually is down to $87 a barrel. It was 120 the other day, so it's heading in the right direction.
Volatile.
Exactly.
Unpredictable.
Unpredictable.
And-
What was that
and-
word?
Generally, just for your guys, information, liquid asphalt, it probably makes up about 50% of the cost of a ton of hot mix asphalt. And that is, very tightly tied into the oil market. We haven't seen that, pour into our business quite yet, but assuming, yes, oil goes to 150 a barrel, that is going to have a significant impact on the price of hot mix asphalt across the state.
Representative what?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I just want to take advantage of your being here, and this is not entirely on subject, but I'm just wondering about innovation in asphalt mixture. If you have anything to share, and I'm wondering specifically, like, we have all these used tires all over the place, and like very little market for used tires. Are you working with used tires in any capacity to put it into asphalt or any other, kind of new ways of creating asphalt, maybe to use less oil and more existing or recycled materials?
So I would say, from an industry perspective, the number one way of kind of reducing your exposure to the oil would be increasing the recycled asphalt percentage allowed in mixes. And I think that's been a long industry push to increase RAP percentage, recycled asphalt, to kind of go above that standard 20%. And we have seen a number of states have pushed forward with that. To your specific question about the tires, there are states out there that have worked with liquid asphalt suppliers and put that into the mix as well. Recycling tires is not something necessarily that Peckham Industries would do, but there are, like I said, a number of liquid suppliers that, as you look at like polymer grades and rubber grades, that certainly would be a home for that.
Is the state setting that threshold for how much recycled asphalt can be used in their paving products, or is that something done at the federal level?
That would be driven by the state, yes.
Okay, so we have existing legislation capping it at 20%, and you're seeing other states using a higher percentage of recycled asphalt. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct. Yes. I think it depends on the mix in the state of Vermont, and they have piloted some higher RAP content mixes. But generally, yes. Yeah. All across. I mean, we've done jobs in New York State with up to 40% RAP. a number of projects down towards the city that have allowed for that use.
And
And
do you
even
have,
even more so, on the local municipality uh level too. I mean, I certainly, I don't know if we necessarily want to would want to make a change like that on an Interstate 89, but some of the local roads, I think increasing flexibility on some of those would certainly help. Probably for every ton of wrap percent you ton of wrap you throw in a mix, you probably get 1% of that liquid asphalt back. So like I said, that would ultimately be the best way to reduce your exposure to liquid asphalt.
So I have a question, Will, related to, you sort of mentioned in terms of the ramp up and Representative Keyser's question, but workforce recruitment, employee retention, employee, please, maybe I missed part of that. I know it's been up and down at different times. Where does sort of your company and the industry stand in terms of hiring and finding workers? And, we continue to have a incredibly low unemployment rate here in Vermont. Any comments
Yeah.
to that area ramping up for your spring work? Any concerns in New York or any of your areas and employee areas, or is that a constant battle?
No, I mean, one of the the benefits of the construction industry is it generally is a higher paying industry. So we don't have quite the same exposure. We are generally able to get employees when we do need them. Just, Peckham Industries as a whole, we do have a precast concrete manufacturer down in Southwest Vermont and Shasbury as well, which, at any given time can employ up to 150 to 200 people. That's a little bit more of a manufacturing setting that does continue to be a struggle. But we've adjusted wages and try to do what we can to remedy that situation.
Other questions? Comments? When you talk about the T-bill specifically, and we ramped up a huge amount of paving projects with this $10 million adjustment to leverage 53 million in federal spending. I know we've had our chief engineer for the agency's been in a couple different times. I know you've had plenty of conversations. The thought to look to the year after and the year after that, specifically in paving. Did you have any, I don't know where that conversation piece goes. I don't know that all those projects have been fully identified or not. The ones that were sort of accelerated, and where does that leave us from there?
You're asking
I know that you've
specifically
had a
about the
number of
projects?
conversations. And another kind of piece of this acceleration for this year and where it leaves us for next year is a question we still all have in our minds. You spoke to it a little bit
And I have that question too.
about the answers that you've received.
Well, I think that, again, I think the purchase and use transfer is a key piece of that. To create that sustainability. I don't know if that's what you're specifically
And
asking.
I guess I would
I
say on
think-
that is there hasn't been a commitment to that yet.
Understood.
Side of the building.
Yeah.
1 year maybe, but not the stepped up approach that maybe was in other bills that we've seen.
Yeah, and I think it's a big risk. I mean, if we're at 148 million this year and nothing's done next year, that could drop significantly. What, 20%, 15%? I don't know.
Those
what it is.
projections you drop is like 7 summers.
Yeah, so and that, I mean, that type of volatility is unworkable.
Yeah.
To the industry. I mean, that would just, we'd rather have some number in the middle year over year than that type of volatility. Now, having said that, I've been having a lot of conversations around this building with a lot of stakeholders all year. Different parties, administration, legislature. One thing that I'm very optimistic about is that everybody I've talked to appears to recognize the problem and believes it's a top priority to address the problem. I think the differences come in what's the best way to do that. So I'm
Recognize that it's more than a 1 year problem.
we've been in this committee for 5 years saying we gotta have a long-term problem here. Absolutely.
I think the committee's well aware. You think
Yeah.
the rest of the building is aware? That it's more than a 1 year problem?
I mean, I've been saying it around the rest of the building too, so. Yes, I think that, I think there's more awareness now than there has been. I do. And as I said, I've been talking to folks on the money committees, been talking to folks in both chambers, both parties. I think there is more of a recognition now that this is an issue. Again, what the best solution is to deal with it, there are differing opinions. I've expressed what we think makes sense, but whatever direction we go in, we're gonna be there advocating for a real solution, because that's what we need. That's what the state needs. I mean, it's gonna cost a lot of money if we don't figure this out now.
Anybody else? Will, so have you gotten along with, most importantly, have you always gotten along with Representative McCoy's daughter? From the meetings within such a young age.
What, I'm sorry, what was the name? I couldn't hear the name.
So Patty McCoy. So
Patty
your mom, yeah, you're in Castleton, we're from Polkney, so.
Okay.
Born at the Rutland Hospital an hour after my daughter. Yeah.
Yeah, my
You're
parents.
gonna have to ask your parents.
Yeah, no, I
still
can't
remember you.
recall the name.
Yeah, I think maybe catechism together if you went to St. Raphael's, yeah, for a little bit, yeah.
Okay, yeah, my parents are currently living in on Lake St. Catherine right now.
Oh, yeah. My constituents, yes. Tell them I said hello.
I am also still a Vermont resident, by the
Oh,
way.
you are, where are you?
I'm down in Manchester area.
Okay,
You guys still in the slate business? Your
Yeah.
parents and stuff? Are still?
Yes,
Yeah.
they are. Yep.
Yeah.
My aunt, uncle, and father.
Yeah.
I know them, yep.
That's the small world that we live in.
Yeah, for sure.
Appreciate you coming in, and I appreciate the support on the issues that we face. And we are going to check and see where our legislative council is to pick back up on mileage-based user fee discussion. So hang around. We're going to, but hang around, and when you see David, we're